The acrid smell of burnt plastic clung to the air, a constant companion in the Southwood summer. 10-year-old Danielle Carter sat on the cracked stoop of her grandmother's house, watching the ambulances. 2 in a single week, ferry away. Another neighbor from the block. This time it was Mr. Elijah, the kind old man who always shared his homegrown tomatoes. He'd been struggling to breathe for months, a wheezing cough echoing through the flimsy walls of his home. Everyone knew it was the chemical plant on the outskirts of town, the one that claimed to be eco-friendly now, but they couldn't prove it. The helplessness was a silent scream in Danielle's chest. October 15, 2020. The tension in Lincoln. High's gymnasium was a live wire. 17-year-old Danielle stood beside her cousin, Malik, his face a mask of bewildered anger. Coach Miller, a man usually revered, was spewing accusations. Malik Jackson, you were caught with a vape in the locker room. 0 tolerance. You're off the team indefinitely. Malik's jaw tightened. Coach, I told you it wasn't mine. I picked it up to throw it away. You saw who actually had it. Mark, the captain, he dropped it. But Mark, the star quarterback from the wealthier side of town, stood silently, his eyes glued to the floor. Coach Miller, however, dismissed Malik's plea with a wave of his hand. Your word against his, Jackson. And Mark has never given us trouble. Danielle stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. Coach, you know Malik, he's never been in trouble. This is unfair. It's because he's from Southwood, isn't it? Because he's black. The coach's face flushed. That's enough, Miss Carter. You're out of line. Malik was expelled for a week, his scholarship prospects hanging by a thread. The injustice burned. That night, Danielle called an emergency meeting at the community center. They think we're invisible, she told her friends, her voice hushed but fierce. They think they can just push us aside. But we won't let them. What can we do, Danny? Asked Aisha, her braids swaying as she leaned forward. They always shut us down. We march, Danielle declared, slamming her fist lightly on the table. We get loud. We make them see Malik, not just a kid from Southwood. We make them see us. The Justice for Malik March started small, a determined group of students walking silently from the community center to the school gates. By the time they reached the principal's office, news of their protest had spread. Parents, neighbors, even a few local activists joined them. Danielle, standing on an overturned bucket, her voice raw, addressed the growing crowd. They say justice is blind, she bellowed, her voice cracking slightly. But too often it's just blind to us. Malik deserves a fair chance, and Southwood deserves to be treated with dignity. We demand a re-evaluation. We demand accountability. The local news did a brief segment, more focused on the disruption than the cause. But a seed had been planted. Danielle, fueled by the injustice, started a digital newsletter, the Southwood Echo, documenting every instance of racial bias, every policy that marginalized her community. It was a defiant act, a quiet roar against the systemic silence. May 22, 2025. The low hum of the fluorescent lights in the Metropolitan Herald newsroom was a constant backdrop to Danielle's frustration. Now 22, she was a junior reporter, constantly battling for meaningful assignments. Her editor, Mr. Davies, a man with a penchant for soft feature stories, usually dismissed her pitches about Southwood. Ms. Carter, I need you to cover the city's best petunia garden contest, he announced, handing her a press release. Danielle sighed but didn't back down. Mr. Davies, I've been getting multiple reports from Southwood about a surge in unexplained chronic illnesses, respiratory problems, rare skin conditions, even some neurological issues, especially among children. It feels similar to what Mr. Elijah went through. It's disproportionately affecting people near the old Allied chemical plant. I think they might be polluting again, despite their green rebranding. He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Allied Chemical was cleared years ago, Carter. You're chasing ghosts. This is just anecdotal. It's not anecdotal when families are losing their children to rare diseases, she retorted, her voice tightening. I have doctors willing to speak off the record, and community members with blood tests. This is a public health crisis. Mr. Davies saw the fire in her eyes, a familiar resolve he'd come to grudgingly respect. All right, Carter. You get me something concrete, something undeniable, and we'll talk. But don't waste my time. The following weeks were a grueling marathon of interviews. Danielle walked door to door, speaking to exhausted parents, wary elders, and grieving families. Many were afraid, whispering about past threats from the plant, about city officials who had always turned a blind eye. The isolation of her investigation was profound. She felt like she was uncovering a dark secret everyone else wanted to keep buried. Moments of fear gnawed at her. What if she was wrong? What if she put these vulnerable families at risk? One evening, a former Allied Chemical employee, Mr. Hayes, contacted her through the Southwood Echo. He was old, his voice raspy, but his eyes held a steely glint. They never stopped, child. They just got smarter. Found a loophole with the old wastewater treatment system. They've been dumping untreated byproducts into the underground aquifer at night, when no one's watching. He provided her with old schematics, internal memos, and a detailed account of the illicit dumping. The evidence was damning. It showed a deliberate, calculated cover-up, sanctioned by powerful figures within the corporation, and quietly ignored by some city officials. The sheer scale of the deception, the callous disregard for human life, made Danielle's blood run cold. The story, Poisoned Roots: The Hidden Health Crisis in Southwood, hit the front page of the Metropolitan Herald a week later, accompanied by a stark photo of a child with a severe skin rash. Danielle's prose was sharp, surgical, weaving together Mr. Hayes' testimony with medical reports, historical permits, and the heartbreaking stories of the afflicted families. She exposed the corporate malfeasance and the city's complicity with unflinching clarity. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Local talk radio shows buzzed with outrage. Social media platforms were flooded with calls for action. Within days, Poisoned Roots wasn't just a local story. It became a national headline. Other major news outlets picked it up, highlighting the ongoing environmental injustices in underserved communities across the country. Danielle's high school protest photos, her Southwood Echo articles, her unwavering journey all resurfaced, painting a picture of a relentless truth-teller. July 10, 2029. Danielle sat opposite a renowned investigative journalist on a primetime national news program. The studio lights felt brighter, the stakes higher. "Ms. Carter," the host began, "your reporting has sparked a federal investigation into Allied Chemical and is forcing a re-evaluation of environmental regulations nationwide. How do you feel, seeing the impact of your work?" Danielle looked at the camera, her gaze steady, resolute. "It's not about how I feel. It's about the families in Southwood who suffered in silence for too long. It's about demanding that their lives matter, that their health matters just as much as anyone else's. My hope is that this story is just the beginning, that it ignites action, not just conversation, and that no community has to face this kind of injustice again." The segment continued, discussing legal ramifications, calls for new legislation, and the urgent need for environmental justice. The story went viral, shared millions of times, becoming a rallying cry for activists and policymakers. Danielle Carter, the determined girl from Southwood, had not only given a voice to the unheard, but had amplified it into a deafening roar, forcing a nation to confront the unseen wounds of systemic neglect. The fear and isolation had been real, but the courage had won, giving birth to a hope that finally, truly change was possible. And if this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share to amplify unheard voices. Subscribe and turn on your post notifications so you'll be the first to know when the next story drops.